Oh, hello, and welcome to Dente, Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist, and with me is...
Hey everyone, it's Travis. We're back again.
Yes. We're here to discuss those internet stories, most creepy and most pasta, and be critically silly doing it. Also, a nice big helping of the kitchen segment.
That's my job. I'm in school for kitchening, so let's kitchen.
Yes, let's culinary up some creepy stories and creepy pastas. So we're going to talk about Sleepytired and Pokemon Go specifically, for like generally as like a topic for creepy stories and creepy scenarios. Because one of our good friends, Matt from Drunk of the Ugly, sent me a Twitter post by Lumpus12, Lumpimp on Twitter, and they were just kind of posting a Tumblr from a Tumblr post by VultureCultureCoyote, who had a dream recently. And that dream was about Pokemon Go and this creepy-ass new Pokemon that started appearing on the service called Sleepytired. That's this, like, creepy, wispy root-looking thing. Like a ghosty root, like mandrake root kind of thing, with like little like tendrils and limbs and like creepy limbs and stuff, and then like a singular red eye in the center of it. And that was appearing on tons of people's Pokemon Go AR layout. And so eventually, after a few weeks, it started propagating or manifesting in the real world when people would use the AR system. And so people just started like making it manifest all over the place because they could. And people being curious, they started like going up to it and like trying to catch it or trying to touch it and stuff in the real world. And it would basically induce some kind of like intense fatigue on them that there is no cure for. Eventually, in the dream, news broadcasts were telling people that Pokemon Go was now illegal and to stop touching or disturbing these creepy little things as they are now everywhere. So that's kind of the basis of our little chat today. And yeah, when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, we haven't really done much for Pokemon Go and like that kind of topic or genre. Even though it does kind of fit like the haunted video game creepypasta motifs. So yeah, that's my rundown.
Yeah, and I was really interested in it, reading through it, mainly because it struck me like outside of the Pokemon Go, it also seems very similar to some of the original Digital Devil Saga and Shimigami Tensei series, and the idea of the digital world actually hacking into a cryptid, esoteric, spooky world. And yeah, the that was the more interesting thing for me. And the chronic fatigue syndromes that pop up with individuals that touch them is also something that kind of harkens back to how, in a couple of other stories I've read, the crossing happens, if you will, where these things act as seeds that eventually grow and populate the world with whatever the hecky comes through the digital divide.
Yeah, like it translates through whatever medium it can to get to our reality.
Exactly.
Yeah, it kind of almost also I kind of like see it like kind of got like vibes of like Digimon, or like in certain seasons where like the digital world was crossing over to the real world.
The good season?
Yeah, the third season. I think was
the best season. Yeah. The only season. Yeah. They made Digimon after season 3? No.
No. We're not going to talk about those ones.
No. Tell me a better Digimon than the sentient recycle bin.
Yeah, exactly. Now, yeah, so this is going to be our kitchen segment. most of our episodes, since there's not really much to do about grammar inquisitions, or our actual thoughts are basically like fodder for this thing. So I will leave a link in the description below for Vulture Culture's Tumblr post. And yeah, I guess we'll kind of just find out. Let's see what we can come up with for this whole thing. So yeah, this thing kind of for like fodder for gaming idea stuff and creepypasta stuff as well. The idea of like an entity from beyond our reality trying to translate into our reality through whatever medium it can, like the digital world, and through like an AR, basically like using an AR almost like a ritual, a mimetic ritual.
Yeah.
That's basically like I'm pretty sure I've heard of creepypastas that have done that, and like for a game scenario, like that's basically like the esoterrorist, like just in a nutshell, like that whole setting where people are trying to use like weird mimetic rituals, and like magic doesn't quite work but the people are trying to like basically break the veil between the supernatural and the real world by whatever means necessary, and like through like basically I believe like basically like communal cognitive awareness of the supernatural. And like I can also see like Tales from the Loop, Delta Green, Little Fears, Fear Itself, those systems. Like
yeah, After the Flood specifically might work a little better because this seems a little more darker than Tales from the Loop.
Yeah. I actually had this idea that came up as I was reading it this morning. For Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green, using the Hypnos god from the Dreamlands.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Having like an avatar of him, like basically being the mimetic entity, like the thing that keeps popping up, generating in these ARs, and then like manifesting through the AR to the real world, and then like having that whole like angle of like, well, Hypnos is the god of sleep, so like fatigue and chronic fatigue and the whole Sleepytired thing, and also kind of like taking some of the inspiration from the Pokemon Go craze that happened like a couple of years back when Pokemon Go first came out, and the mass hordes of people that were like just going out and like obstructing like traffic to get to a certain location.
Oh, there was a story of this. Like when it came out, Niantic used some of its previous points that were really important. So they found a military base because it was an excuse for military personnel to actually do something while stuck on base.
Yeah.
So when Pokemon came out, you had a bunch of civvies trying to get into military bases. And
God.
like, yeah, that level of just like systems not working because of human error being translated into something potentially more nefarious.
Yeah. Like, God, can you imagine that was like the actual reason for like the whole like Area 51 raid?
We gotta get our Pokemons
from Area 51. They're actually aliens.
Gotta get my Arceus. I gotta get my gold.
God, that's like legit. Like probably like a Dreamlands or Amigo kind of like some kind of weird Migo like experiment or something that they're trying to convince regular people to just like storm this place so that they can get their shit back. Or Yithians maybe even.
Yeah, I really since I side on the Digimon and the SMT side of things, I really like this Hypnos line of it because it's because it feeds into the chronic fatigue, and it feeds into the idea of like these things don't actually do anything, but it's like poking holes and creating little hole spots in the world to bleed into the Dreamlands. And even then you could actually pull this into the idea of Paprika from Satoshi Kon, if you've seen that film.
I have not. I've been meaning to.
Because that also deals with the super simplified story of that. It's based off a book. Well, apparently the movie is better. There's a machine that lets you do therapy in people's dreams.
Okay.
And an individual can go in there. It's not legal yet, so one of the scientists that works on it is rogue and has developed a separate personality from herself. And then people start living out their dreams in reality and killing themselves.
Oh, Jesus. So we got
they're trying to figure out Yeah, it definitely came along with the Inception. And then as it goes on, dreams and reality merge. And you
Oh
can't
God.
tell which is which until the very end when it's literally like, hey, it is actually dreams and reality are merging into one thing. Try and fix it.
God,
So like
that's yeah.
that would be a good thread to stitch into this game idea we're coming up with. Now I will warn you, actually parsing that together took me and Rebecca about 2 hours of talking to actually finally get down the idea that like, oh, these are, because it seems disjointed and weird at the end, and it's like, oh no, that's because it's literally running on dream logic because dreams and reality have become merged.
Oh shit, Jesus.
And it's a head trip.
Yeah, I've been meaning to check it out because I keep hearing about it, and it seems like it would be up my alley for like dream punk kind of stuff.
1,000%. So yeah, like this is a way of doing Paprika and like stitching together the Dreamlands, because that one relies on a simple head thing. You fall asleep, someone else has it, and they're in control. This could just be a leaked version of that technology that, or an esoteric, unnatural version of this technology that leaks and creates holes in the universe. And these people that have chronic fatigue, there's no talk about what they do other than they go home and they're tired. Like,
Yeah,
somebody could investigate people and realize that, hey, these people are being pulled further and further, or they're just disappearing in weird spots.
yeah. Because again, that's another thing. Another facet of Pokemon Go was people stumbling upon like weird shit or like like devious stuff that was going on. Like people would come across a dead body while looking for a Pokemon, or they'd fall off a cliff because they weren't looking where they were going, or they'd come across a drug deal and they'd have to they were getting chased or mugged by fucking criminals.
Yeah,
Like,
and I think
yep.
Pokemon Go is so fascinating because I do research in AR and VR. That's part of my giant umbrella of research I do, and it is the best thing to point out as augmented reality to somebody, even if it's not quite the right academic definition. So it creates this nice cultural touchstone, as you described, for everyone to latch onto for the idea. And I think what we're going to end up doing on this kitchen sink is like our end point goes to what game we want, with the technology of Pokemon Go being the core, which is probably me restating it. But like, if we go with the Dreamlands, there's ways to adapt this, versus if we want to just literally copy Tamers, and these are the things that are going to manifest into something. Honestly, I could steal this and stitch my Digimon game the Mon game I've made together, because it's just, hey, play Pokemon, and then these things sack enough energy, then develop into the Mon eggs that cause the game.
Yeah. No, I 100%. I actually kind of also reminded. I don't know if it's publicly available, but on Roleplay Public Radio's podcast, or maybe on their Patreon or something, they had a Cthulhu Dark game. It might also be one of their like bundles of games that they just aren't release it. They're just you have to buy to listen to them. But it's like basically Ross from their GM to Cthulhu Dark game, where Amazon, a not Amazon corporation, had acquired some AR glass technology, or like VR technology, that was basically they bootstrapped Yithian tech that they found in the Australian desert and wrote the symbols that were on some tablets. And it basically, when you wore these VR headsets, it pulled your like subconscious dream, like your nightmares and dreams like scapes into reality, like as a side effect. Like it was basically a reality bleed for by wearing these VR things, and it would be usually nightmare nightmare imagery or like nightmare content, because that was the strongest cognitive pull.
Cool.
So yeah. Also, I'm also kind of getting a little bit of Carcosa vibe when we were talking about like reality bleeding in, but that's a little well trodden.
Well, okay. So my feelings on Carcosa has adapted since I am actually doing a lot of research on. I'm trying to get an article published and potentially an entire chapter for my dissertation on new weird versus Lovecraftian horror. versus neo Lovecraftian horror. I think my issue with Carcosa boils down to is that the scariness of Carcosa is the scariness of the Dreamlands, and the issue is the Dreamlands represent the new wild frontier, very Western colonialist frontier. Go explore it, figure it out, but it will constantly expand, and you'll never get it. Where Carcosa is the unknowable location where people go in but they don't come out. The dark heart of Africa, the South American jungles, the Russian gulags. It represents an unknowable unknown that only those inside know, versus the frontier nature of the Dreamlands, which would have the Carcosa style area populated all over the place. But because it's more of it's able to be explored, it is less scary, even though in reality it's probably more. So
it's, if I'm getting it right, it's kind of like the difference between going into what you know is like basically going into the fresh state of Chernobyl versus going to Chernobyl or like Pripyat nowadays, where like there's pockets of radiation that you're not sure, like you have sensors for, but like,
exactly.
Basically going into a hot zone that is like recent, and like knowing that you're going to be submerged in like hostile radioactive material or radioactive fields, versus going to an area that might have radioactive fields, but you might be able to navigate around them. Like one's more hostile, like one's more like unknowably hostile, versus the other one has like the potential for hostility, and but there's also like areas that aren't as like threatening.
Yeah, exactly. It's the fear of the unknown, which Carcosa encapsulates in itself. And by not being described outside of a play, you throw in the ability of like, oh, you can't escape. Somebody else is controlling your fate. There's a bunch of loss of control and information that makes it kind of this black hole of scary, where the Dreamlands are probably more scary because it's unchartable, it's unknowable. There would be areas like this, and the nature of the constantly shifting human mind is way scarier than having someone else control it or being out of control. So
God, I just want to
you can see this subtle distinction, but at the same time how I've just kind of started mentioning them as the same place.
Yeah. Also, man, I just want to like see a game or something with a cult that are just called the Cartographers, and they've gone nuts because they're trying to geocache the Dreamlands.
Isn't that an Arc Dream thing? Didn't they release the Labyrinth, and now they're trying to? They charted Carcosa, and now they're going to chart the Dreamlands.
Oh God, is that what the Dreamlands was about, or what the Labyrinth was about?
Yes, it was an attempt to chart Carcosa, which I enjoy Arc Dream, but I think that's antithetical to the entire idea of Carcosa.
That's fair. I mean, there's always like different angles to like people take for games and stuff. So,
yeah.
Also, another thing
personal opinion.
Yeah. Another idea for actually, it was coming to mind for the Hypnos angle with like people swarming to get to a location to find this like one specific Pokemon. I just imagine can you imagine like for a game scenario, like a scene where like you get to a park where like a ton of people were like going because that's where like the thing was, and then you get there and everyone's just like on the ground, like in comas, or like just passed out, or like they're just in some they're just lying on the ground around the thing, like because their minds have basically all been transported to like the Dreamlands or something.
Yeah,
as a result of the Sleepytired, because of its like chronic fatigue and such.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's specifically why I went into Hypnos and like chronic fatigue syndrome. I know a couple of people on my social media who have it, and it's one of those of invisible disabilities. Like they have to leave very early because it's just like, I'm going to go home and sleep for 20 hours, and it's it's an invisible disability that people don't really understand because they outside of the usual, you're just lazy. It is an actual diagnosis ability, but that relates like. Giving that to somebody is so debilitating to the real world and starts warping their perception of reality that it is easily to see that this is some way of trying to almost, like I said, seed, but this is all like it is trying to reach out and cultivate cultists, if we want, or individuals to help propagate a message. And if this is literally just like Hypnos is like, hey, y'all aren't doing the whole frontiers colonial expansion shit anymore.
No.
I need people.
Yeah, it's just like,
Play
hey,
this
so
video game. Come explore my shit. You got more stuff here that I don't know about. Fix it.
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh god, yeah, it's like basically a needy god. um, Another kind of angle I was looking at for this was so again, like the creature, like a creature trying to use like our like mediums and technology to try and like get into our reality. I was kind of also reminded by like the Tillinghast resonator from the Beyond.
Oh yeah.
Because like what if an AR system basically just accidentally lets us like basically infiltrates another reality that's like parallel to ours.
And what we're talking about, like even that is an idea I've had for a game. I've never had the chance to sit down because I probably could try and do that next year, not 2020 but 2021, because you can make an AR app that will read the room and do it for like escape the room stuff. I've done that before,
Yeah.
and I've also considered like making an AR over app for a Gen Con game that is a lens of truth, a la a Tillinghast.
Yeah, I literally
thing.
have that in my notes. The hidden like a hidden world through the AR Easter egg like system or whatever, and using the lens of truth to discover like the things that are connected to our reality, like a connected layer to our reality. That's literally in my notes for Pokemon Go for this. But yeah.
So yeah, I think we have a very, depending on how you want to run this, since we are definitely a horrific creepypasta side thing.
Mhm.
If we I'm gonna bleed a little bit of my personal research into this.
That's fine.
That's all I've been doing. If we go with the Dreamlands idea, we'll go back to Digimon and like Pocket Monster ideas in a second. Maybe
Why not both?
Why not both? But
'Cause-
I super adore the idea, and this is a thing that I've talked about before on your show, and it's a thing I'm actually working on in a publishing paper. I'm trying to get at the end of this semester. Is the idea of the new cosmic horror, and that the idea is that just because Hypnos is a god doesn't mean he's any more capable than we are. It's a higher being. Again, like I've mentioned before, I think in Bloodborne, like everything there is super powerful, but they're still just as miserable and stuck on this plane of reality as we are. And the Narthla Hotep stand-in of the moon presence, while it's pulling strings, it's still pretty much stuck doing its own thing until it's freed. And like the idea that I'm pulling from for this a lot of this research in this field is that like Lovecraft made things malicious and omnipotent. The new ones are like they're powerful and benign to beneficial, and just by being benign, they seem malicious. And then making that so that you have this story that you've stitched together, like we said, of like this is literally Hypnos going that nobody's been here since the 70s, and those that do are like strung out junkies that don't know what to do and just kind of die. I need some people that are culpable of understanding modern ideas that aren't completely wrenched in the head for whatever reason. Now go. Creates this very interesting push-pull dynamic that is missing in the old ones of like the horror of the unknown is now amplified by the fact the unknown doesn't know itself.
The unknown doesn't know itself.
And and literally,
yeah,
you're having to uncover something that is unknowable to even the unknowable, and trying to express that to itself. It deals with a lot of other stuff I probably won't bring up in this creepy talk. Maybe next year this time I can come on and talk about some stuff that's going in my life to further explain this stuff. So listen for another time. But there's this inherent fear that happens in cosmic horror and horror in general of like the fear of the unknown is the absolute fear of losing everything, when that's not the worst thing that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But finding that the fear of the unknown and realizing you hit rock bottom and then you survive, and then you realize the thing that you usually turn to for success or to claw your way up is just as confused about existence as you are, levels the playing field and show how bleak the universe can be, and adds that level of absolute horror.
Oh God, it's like banality of like on a level of banality, just like cause it like when the gods themselves. I mean, it makes sense because the gods, even like classically speaking, gods were like flawed people as well. But yeah, just like the horror and banality of just the fact that like the things that are supposed to like consider us ants are just as fucking confused and like miserable with their existence as we are. That is fucking terrifying.
Yeah,
It's
and
kind of
like,
depressing, actually. Yeah,
I mean,
it's like tragic.
it's again to espouse upon my research. It's the idea that Lovecraft was scared of. Was scared of the ocean, scared of women, scared of other people, and this is in response to World War One and World War Two, showing how little he was, and the dissolution of his upper middle class lifestyle, and to reveal he's kind of just a poor schlub and a world that is slowly losing. Kick that forward now 100 years later, roughly, we have an entire generation that's like, yeah, this is Tuesday for us. And we're seeing things that are completely like horrific to people. Like if you go and tell your grandparents about stuff that some of our generations experience, it's unknowable to them. The idea that a single keystroke, just by some overworked worker who had a greasy cheeseburger, dropped a piece of ketchup, and when he swiped it away, it hit a 2 instead of a 3, and now you're destitute and you can never find a job for the rest of your time.
Yeah.
That level of banality and unmalicious evil is really hard for people outside of our generation to kind of understand, especially with certain individuals and power structures now who are maliciously stupid.
Yeah.
And like they represent a great example of how evil the old Lovecraft are. Is like actually malicious, actually attempting to do something, but being kind of an idiot about it, being overt about it, but having these followers that are able to do it, which is another reason why Lovecraft himself has had such an explosion lately. Brexit, Trump, however you feel about him, can be viewed as these kind of returns to a thing Lovecraft would be scared of. Now, though, it's tempered by the fact that we have other things that are still Lovecraftian horrors, but not quite traditional.
Yeah, because I mean, like cosmic horror comes in many forms, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it hits closer and farther from home than we'd like. So, so we've been touching a lot on like the Lovecraftian and cosmic horror side of this. So I'm not sure if you remember, Travis. My one idea I came up with a while back for the laugh pyres for Night's Black Agents.
Yes, and I love them.
The idea of like basically cartoons translating to our world, but like because of that like process from like 2D to 3D, they became statues, and they needed they could only move like basically through like kind of almost like they were quantumly locked. So like if you saw them, they were statues, but then like they would move beyond that, like when you weren't observing them, and they fed off of human laugh. Basically, they fed off human joy. As their source, because they were cartoons, and that's what kind of like the whole modus operandum of cartoons is to promote joy. So I kind of had an idea for like using that kind of angle on this, and just like again draping it with the whole like augmented reality thing, like and even like another idea I've been talking with Adam from RPX on a previous episode we did with cognivores, which are basically just thought eaters. Because like AR systems, and even like the like AR glasses, and like using your phone and stuff like that, like these things are like they're basically these like the tablet or the phone or the glasses, they're basically just a window to this other thing that is just feeding off of our cognitive thought, just looking at them and like trying to like figure out where to go for the geocaching and stuff. So yeah, I had this. I like the idea of like using these like weird, not quite digital world, not quite something in between supernatural and digital world, kind of like entities that are using our technology as a window to get to their food source, which is our thought processes.
Yeah, the cognitive language is scary.
Yeah,
and language is really, really a thing that people take for granted. And going to grad school like I am is basically learning how to talk, learning a brand new language of like academics who are both 10 years behind in concepts, but are 200 years worth of language stored up behind them. And playing and making people aware of the issues of language and how you can disrupt it and alter it and stuff like that and like manipulate it is terrifying. I'm going to avoid talking about the Gen Con game that I'm going to run this year, which looks like it's going to be the entire campaign, but that also too relies on a cognition entity and how it disrupts the ideas of language.
Yeah. Spoilers for that, or look forward to that, because somebody's probably going to be bound to be recording that one. Either me or somebody who else is on the table.
I'll be recording it. But yeah, so like the idea that cognivores and your laughivores are already, it's already stitched into modern culture. The vampire started as a thing that stole your life, but now we have psychic vampires. Dr. Sleep, which recently came out, deals with psychic vampires that steal fear from individuals, but specifically focusing on like the people with shining and stuff like that. So like,
literally like going after psychic people.
And then, but the interesting thing you bring up is taking the humanity out of it, because part of the fear of the vampire is that they are human enough to be terrifying and be a facsimile of humanity, thus elevating our fear of them because they could be us at any point. When you change them into an entity a la even humanoid, but not actually look like a human, you introduce a level of nature to it and a level of inhumanity, kind of is the simplest one, that removes that alignment of this is a human, this is not a human, this is a human, this could be me, instead of like, this is just a natural thing we've never known about, this is just an entity that has laid low, that we don't understand, it's a natural process and stuff like that. It is both harder and easier to scare people.
I think there's actually another, again, not to keep bringing up podcasting games of other people's, but I'm pretty sure Arc Dream, they, for the Delta Green, there's a game called Black Sat, where the entities are basically like vortices or like tolpaic entities that like the more you look at them, the more power they're able to like pull into our reality, or the more they're able to actually like pull into our reality. And they exist beyond our like they can't in that game. I get spoilers for Black Sat for Delta Green a little bit. They exist beyond the sphere of Earth. So when we go out into space, we're in their territory. We're in their turf.
Yeah.
And they're basically free-flowing entities that are just vertices of like angles, like in terms of like what they look like. And so like they cause people to like kind of want to look at them, but the more you look at them, the more power they have, more influence they have on the reality, and the more they can just basically paste you as they consume your like your essence, essentially.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of goes back, I guess, to the Tillinghast thing, where like the resonator basically gives us puts us in targeting range of something that's just like, that's usually invisible and unaware of us as much as we are invisible and unaware of them.
Yes, the idea that it can't see you, so you can't see it can't see you, you're safe. but once
Yeah.
it's aware, it's all over.
Yeah, you look into the abyss long enough, and it looks back, and then it starts hunting you. It actually, I guess this is a little segue to another idea I had for ARG systems as well, along the lines of Pokemon Go. So, what would happen if like an AR system, like Pokemon Go or whatever, accidentally like their whole like their network of their Wi-Fi and like Bluetooth or connections like for or their GPS system or whatever, like what if it connected to an older virtual layer that wasn't even human, like say the Yithians or some other alien civilization that existed before humanity had a VR layer like laid out over Earth, and then when they were wiped out, well, I mean, it's up in the cloud essentially, so it's just been like sitting there, like settling and molding and like decaying over eons, and then this new younger civilization pops up and starts and accidentally taps into it by some like fluke or some like angle of the programming or whatever, and so now you have the remnants of that digital world kind of leaking in and trying to like basically be known because their world is dead or dying.
So this reminds me of Guilty Gear very slightly. The fighting game Guilty Gear has a concept called the backyard, which is essentially there is a layer to the universe. They call it an alternate world, but it's almost like you're saying, a cloud where the building blocks of reality are, and it's where they draw magic from. So all the magic and weird shit that happens in Guilty Gear is literally people touching in on the backyard. And that's why a lot of the stuff in that game is kind of techno looking, is because you do is you're literally getting the code from the backyard and implementing it onto yourself.
God, so it's basically it uses the theory that like the universe is just a hologram.
Kind of. Without it's a little bit, it's actually a little bit closer to your cloud theory. And that are your cloud analogy of like it's just the thing that is in the universe floating around. There are ways into the backyard. There are people that have access to it. There are people that make monsters out of it. Dizzy's, I think, a quarter or half weapon made out of the back door. Her mom was one, Justice. But the idea that if you can find it, and if you can just find a way to hook into it, is how you draw power. And so that's that. I mean, because what you're ultimately describing with the cloud is the aether, and the usual idea of like magic as a wild wind that permeates everything and just literally hooking into it. Which again is a great example of why the weird is so good at this, because we're drawing instances of science fiction, literally the cloud, and fantasy, and now we've got this weird combination that we can start talking about the power of this in more abstract terms. And I think that one is really cool to talk about, because now that we have a concept and we've used the cloud, we kind of have an understanding of what it would like. We also know how much garbage is up in there.
Yeah.
And how much weird shit gets accidentally uploaded to the cloud, and then, oh, it's broken. Oh, whatever. And like, imagine. And this is part of my ideation process, is like, if I make a game, say like I was making this game, I literally will go to our cloud server for our PhD and see who has some public files, or for my school, and see what the public files are, because there's always weird shit people forget.
Yeah. And just like out of context weirdness.
Yeah, grab 4 or 5 of them and bam, you've got an idea for a game. These are just some weird etchings someone has yanked out of the sky, and now they're using. They might not even work. I mean, 95% of this is somebody doing online coding as quickly as possible, and there's like 6 versions of it, and none of them work. But each of them have highly catastrophic, all fail at a certain point, usually sometimes highly catastrophic.
Yeah.
There you go. Actually, you've got a game.
Yeah. 2 things actually just came to mind from that, from what you're just bringing up there. First off, like, look at all the radio signals that we just throw into the universe.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine I'm just picturing like God, I might actually design this or something. But like basically, some again a cognivore kind of thing, or like a vertice kind of thing from like that Delta Green game, but it's just made up of or is consuming the signals that are being sent out into space, and so it's just been accumulating human knowledge and culture through all the garbage radio signals that we've just been like throwing up into the void. Like again, like how like if some alien might stumble upon, unfortunately, Adolf Hitler's speech because it was tossed into the ether, like yeah, that kind of thing, like kind of like the cosmic, like some kind of cosmic cloud entity is just like following the trail of like radio signals all the way back to its point of origin, which is us.
Yeah, and an interesting thing to a wrinkle to add to the complexity of that monster itself is the fact that radio waves are a Goldilocks zone. This is the issue of trying to look for space for radio waves, is that if we theorize that if technology advances similar to our own, radio waves only last a certain number of centuries before they stop happening. And so like this thing actually would be very detrimental depending on its speed and movement, because it would show up right at the certain ecological ages almost routinely, depending on its speed and power and stuff like that. But then when it shows up, it could also start bouncing radios that it's consumed back, and we start hearing things that don't make sense, something that's alien.
Yeah, actually, that also kind of brings up like actually Eclipse phase with the Titans, where we just suddenly get a signal or something that fucks over everybody's or fucks over like a key part of the military complex, like AI complex. I could see that actually like being like, yeah, like taking that, reversing that actually, and just having like, what if it's not even on Earth, like that, like something like, or like from, or some other dimension or some Earth, it's just some close enough alien planet sends out their garbage radio signals or their equivalent of like Wi-Fi signals and radio signals out into the aether as well, like we do, and it bombards Earth with basically with those signals that basically just hack into and intermingle with like again our AR systems or our VI system interfaces.
Yeah.
So then we suddenly have again like it like that was unintentional. It wouldn't happen on their world, but because it's interacted with our stuff, it accidentally summons things into like the tangible universe as a result of interacting with us, or just takes over our like interface, our virtual interfaces.
Yeah, and like now we've gone from Cthulhu to sci-fi, because I don't count Eclipse phase as Cthulhu.
That's fair. Yeah, it's horror sci-fi, but it's not Lovecraft. It's not. It's kind of cosmic horror in a sense, but it's also its own thing.
It's its own thing. It has a good echo. It has a good niche that it's hacked out. But yeah, and like, so I had a thought and it disappeared.
Actually, well, while you're trying to think of that, have you heard of a game system called the Strange?
I have not.
So it's by Monty Cook. It uses the Cipher system, but essentially the setting is what's really cool about it. The setting is that like Earth, like our real world, is just is a hub world, and the universe beyond us is actually again like kind of like how we were talking about like the cloud and like the cosmic cloud. It's basically the cosmic cloud, and all of our mythology worlds and pop culture worlds are just separate like worlds within this like weird universe, like multiverse kind of like dimension. And you can translate between them if you have the right like reality coding.
This reminds me of the Bifrost. That's the word.
Ah, yes, the Asgardian Rainbow Bridge.
Yeah, that connects to multiple worlds. No, that's an interesting twist on that.
Yeah, it basically, from what I gathered, reading like the run for it, is basically they wanted to make a game where you could like translate to like whatever game world or whatever setting world you wanted to like play in, like for like kind of like crossover games with other things. Like say, I've actually listened to one by or a campaign by the Ragnerd Rock guys, and they go to like the My Little Pony universe, but they also translate to like the default fantasy world that they have in the game itself. And it, from the sounds of it, it's basically like, hey, do you want to go to this like fictional universe? Well, this game allows you to do that. We're not going to mention that in our book because we don't want to get copyright sued.
Yeah.
But this game system or the setting will let you do that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I liked the idea. It kind of brought up when we were talking about like again the cosmic cloud and how like we're like there's a back door or backyard like space, and that's basically, it was reminding me of the Strange, which is the universe anomaly or whatever that they call the aether that surrounds the other, like all the multiverses.
That stitches everything together.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and it's and everything. I think with the exception of Earth itself and a few other like keystone planet like worlds, all the other worlds are basically just manifested from from creativity and imagination and like human thought, human pop culture and history.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's like a zone, an area that is like known called the Machine, and it's basically the universal machine. And like in that campaign that the Ragnarok guys ran, they were trying to find a guy who had accidentally learned the cheat code by speed running through reality. Like he'd found a glitch in reality that allowed him to get to the machine, the engine, the world, basically the world's engine.
The world engine.
And allow him to like basically like he could rewrite reality if he was in the wrong hands. So yeah, it's an interesting system, and it kind of like again harkens to this whole idea of like using AR or using like the Pokemon Go kind of thing as like a translation for like other reality entities or things trying to get in.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. And I think so. One of the, how do I phrase this? I don't know. I'm having struggles talking. No, and I think that's, again, we've covered a wide breadth of ideas. This is a really good one for allowing for that weirdness of like, hey, here's an AR, let's go going. If we since we're so focused on AR, perhaps if you want to do, this is a little side tangent, if you want to do this as a historical piece, you can take the ideas of this game and then move it back to Ouija boards and mediums.
Oh yeah, hell yeah, that, yep.
And then now you have your haunted house story. Like, why is this house so haunted? Well, they did a Ouija board and this thing showed up and it just seeped into the walls and now everything is awful.
So basically it's like, oh my god, yeah, it's like tulpas and like the whole tulpa project kind of thing. You're familiar with that, right, Travis?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Where and like Ouija board stuff are basically just the AR Pokemon Go-esque like medium of like the turn of the century like kind of thing, where they accidentally created or like either summoned this thing from like from the aether or from the cosmic cloud or the backyard or wherever, using the mediums they had. And that's basically, again, it's like all rituals are just mimetic magic essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
and
thought magic and mimetic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this is a good thing because this is me going back to the Digimon, Pokemon, monster game.
God. Yeah.
Is this allows for the idea of setting it in a location through even the AR games, but like the idea that the Mr. Creepy Face is not actually just this sink, but is instead a, like you mentioned that it's root-like. It almost, I think it looks a little bit more veiny, like a raw nerve. And it also doesn't have a pupil.
It's just a red, like just a red eye, like the what is the colored part of the eye? It's the iris. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
The idea I get out of this thing is like a part of what I like to think is that the reason people stop touching it isn't because of the fatigue syndrome. Is that after the first one that got touched so much, something came out of it. It is itself an egg or some type of progenitor of another entity that it takes something from everyone it touches and it makes something afterwards, which, if we continue the line of the old haunted house, it seeps into the walls. It becomes a monster house because it's so full of these energies of people touching it. If we do the AR overlay where it just actually gets kind of stuck, instead of, you could talk about how these things have been around, and that's why we have haunted houses and locations like that. But now they've kind of gone away, and the AR is allowing us the interactions on accident to let them just propagate, and further showcases that it's an actual evolution that we haven't run into before because of the natural processes of these things latching onto locations, buildings, sometimes people, and creating something awful. Like, you could mention one of these as like a negative example, latching onto a person who did the Exorcist style thing, and they become a murderer. But now that we have these AR, they are accidentally fish lost in a net. They just get pulled up and they're left in a single location. And now when people touch them, the draining effect is as a response to keep them away, because you always felt something in the locations these things naturally inhabited. But now that they aren't tied to a location, their form is free to grow to their natural state or be influenced by those that interact with it to form a creature. So going back to the Mon game that I talk about, this would be how you would form the monster eggs that eventually hatch into your partner, because this could be something that is just like, hey, I keep trying to figure out what it is and I feel weird, and then it slowly lost its exposed nerve system, and that eye finally bulged out into an egg, and the entire sac ambiotic fluid that has been protecting this egg sloughed away, and then I just am left with this weird egg I've been taking care of that hatches into Canuckmon, or whatever the heck your thing was.
Yes, Canuckmon. I love it. I really, I've been holding back my giddiness from this entire idea that you've been bringing up about, like, because I just want to see like even a 2-game thing where, or like maybe a 3-game thing where we just each game would be a historical moment where, or like a situation like maybe before the Ouija board and stuff, again, a haunted location or like a haunted house kind of thing. And then the next one is the Ouija board scenario where like they accidentally summon something. And then the last one is like the AR, like Pokemon Go, like analog kind of game, or AR system. And then like each one is basically it's just showing like the evolution of like a belief entity, kind of like how they are created through our like cognitive,
what
like,
lens we
issues.
Put them through.
Exactly, yeah. Like, and like they're all made of the same stuff. They're just evolving to accommodate the times, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, and I like the idea of like, haunted houses. The reason why there's like it's not as crazy, like in the modern sense, the reason why there's not like haunted houses on every block is because people were a lot more focused. Like, people focused, like, had things set, like basically human, like, folklore and belief kind of like settled like specific areas, not like everywhere willy-nilly. Like, it's just like one haunted, like the haunted house was the center point because it was like the strongest collection of belief. And then like with the Ouija board stuff, you started getting like weird like things being summoned, like the tulpas or like poltergeists and stuff like that because of the Ouija board stuff. And it was a little bit more frequent than specifically haunted houses, but not as much, because it was a brand, it was a product that people could buy across America or across the countries.
Yeah.
And then the AR thing is where you hit like basically the crescendo, because they're fucking everywhere. Like, it's just the world is like basically this mini campaign or this like 3-set game is just showing like how these things are going to take over eventually, because we keep giving them more and more like ways of like evolving and adapting to our like technology. Like, they weren't hampered by like by the Industrial Revolution and like the technology boost that humanity had. They were bolstered by it as a result. Like, because I've seen in like stories of like fairies and folk and stuff like that, where the Industrial Revolution is basically where fairy folk kind of dropped off in terms of their population, because of iron and like technology and like scientific logic. But I always think it's interesting if like, well, what if they did have that point, but they eventually kind of like they basically adapted. So like basically there was mutations that started evolving the fairy folk culture or civilization or whatever have you, their organism began evolving to adapt to like the industrial human technology, scientific logic complex that we have.
Yeah, that's the core idea to my Toy Story game. To put it quite simply, there's a book by the artist Brahm called Plucker, which is like dark Toy Story. It boils down to a kid gets sick with what they think is scarlet fever. All the toys are alive because he plays with them. If he doesn't play with them, they stop existing.
Oh
They stop
God.
having sentience. So the kid gets sick, and it turns out it's actually a demon coming from one of the toys he got from his grandfather and broke it on accident. It released into it. And so one of the toys, there's a little bit of inherent racism in it. The Southern hoodoo witch nurse stitches does something to it. I want to say stitches a live heart into it, like an animal heart, but still of it.
Yeah.
So that it can go hunt down the demon. And so what I did is take this idea, and the entire basis of this was the idea that, all folklore was true. All folklore is seen by young people because they have no resistance, brick wall built up. But also the fact that the Industrial Revolution has, much like all native environments, radically altered the topography and ecology of them. So like the will-o-wisps that call people in the woods now have to do roadside calls. So the disappearing on roadside. It's the will-o-wisp now trying to evolve. This is one that is the big bad of the campaign, is essentially one that used to feed on people pretty regularly, a la serial killers that were low grade hiding, and it's one that hasn't had to ecologically change, but its tactics and uses are. So this one specifically is having to deal with, in the book, it would probably have been fine by the end of it, because I've done this so long that I think I've had these two merged. But essentially, it's eating the soul out of the kid to right its body. The adaptation I had for the Toy Story game was that it is one of a species, and one of the species died off because the scarlet fever had people burn all their possessions to help clear the air, and that because kids used belief in their toys to help act as external white blood cells, it helped kill this thing because the thing was leeching off of the toys and what the kid was. It died because, just by happenstance, burning everything happens to burn its connection. This is one that kind of just sits and sips on a lot of things, and so the toys themselves are what the players would be. It would be a campaign that was either Little Fears or monsters, depending on who you're playing, the kid or the toy. And your entire goal was you're a small town in the 90s, small suburb in the 90s, and everyone gets sick with this mysterious disease. And as you're playing through, you're the kids trying to figure out what's going on, and then at night you're the selected toy running around, and you're having to destroy other toys infected to figure out a way to get to the infectee.
Night. Wow. Yep.
I do dark stuff.
Yep. And really interesting nostalgia, like twisted nostalgia, essentially. But no, I love it. I love that idea. And another idea, or another thing that kind of came up, because we were talking about the Sleepytired itself, and how again, I kind of thought it was like a Rudy thing, where you thought it was like the membrane thing. You're familiar with how vampire vines work, right?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, it's what if it, kind of going on the whole what if it's some kind of weird cosmic, or some kind of interdimensional root creature, that the reason why people get chronic fatigue from it is because it's basically just leeching off, again, cognivore angle, leeching off thought processes, or even just belief off of somebody, and by doing so, they're basically it's draining people, so that it can flourish in our reality. And then when it gets to a certain point, it basically blooms, and the shriveled root like angle kind of thing is like basically peels away, and that red thing is like, again, like you're bringing up with the egg, the Digimon or the Mon egg.
Yeah.
It basically evolves from being this like withered root thing that's like vampirizing off of like the reality and anybody that's near it, and then just becomes this like creature or thing fueled from like nightmare.
Yeah.
Like basically it's taking all of the what it's taking from people is like their greatest fears, or their like what the strongest like cognitive imagery that they have, and just patchworks that into an entity when it blooms.
Yeah, this again, I really enjoyed this because this reminded me of a shorter book series. Let's see if I can remember it. It has a clown in it.
Oh, good.
Dream Watch, Dark Watch.
Is it a Russian novel series?
No.
Okay.
I'm
You
trying.
said Dark Watch, so I was like, Night Watch, maybe?
I can't remember what it is, but it's essentially it takes the idea of cognizing the entirety of your horrors into an entity and makes it into a disturbing positive. Let's see if I can find it, because I started working on a rule book for it for a couple of systems.
A disturbing positive? Like,
so the idea is that Shadow Walk. That's it. 1 second, I'm gonna pull up the book. So if anybody is interested,
yep,
you can read it. They're short. They were airplane books. They were still pretty good.
by Tim Wagner? Is that the one?
Dreamstalkers by Tim Wagner. Yes,
yep.
Exactly. So the idea of this.
Yeah, I remember seeing this image of the clown. Okay.
So the idea of this is that the dream world is real. The waking world and the dream world are two separate entities. The dream world waxes and wanes depending on the moons. So, and there are people that go to the dreamlands. And in this case, you're cops. The main character, I can't remember her name. Audra. Audra is a human, and Mr. Jinx is her partner. Mr. Jinx is an incubi, because all of the entities are incubi, and the incubi are made from nightmares. More specifically, waking dream night terrors.
Oh, okay, so what like incubi originally were, which were like sleep paralysis kind of things.
Yes, quite literally. And so what it is they go into this in the readings, but they form over decades as children based on horrors or fears, and they all have their unique abilities. So one is a giant evil dog, one's like a snake lady with a scorpion tail. Jinx is a clown, because clowns are terrifying, and clowns are always scary and are known to be super scary in the series.
Especially as principals.
what they discuss at a certain point, like Jinx even talks about this, is like they are horrific to their caretakers on purpose because they're doing their best to essentially try out. And so the children's lives are miserable because the incubi are trying to be the best scary thing so that they can help them later. It's very monsters. And then some people have less connection to it, so they get a little bit of the ability to feel the dreamlands or maybe make weird objects in the dreamlands, but they don't get an actual incubi.
I was also going to say it's also very Monsters Inc.
Yes. So yeah, and so this entire book itself could be another inspiration to use for this cognitive monster that feeds off your fears and then blooms into something. It doesn't have to be a clown. It can be a giant pit bull or whatever the heck it is.
Yeah. And and then again, to bring it back to the Pokemon Go angle, these things are they're happening at a much rapider rate because there are people, because they basically found a way to tap into the AR and again the angle of the game, and so they mark themselves where they're going to be or where they can manifest. They get a shit ton of people to that location thinking it's going to be a Pokemon, and then just drain everyone there.
Yeah.
And so they're usually it takes a long time for them to fester, for them to bloom. Say maybe even being at a haunted house kind of angle. And then they also maybe they also spot up in graveyards because they know people will go to bring a Ouija board out to a graveyard and try and commune with the spirits. And so that's how they try and get basically they've been getting their nourishment. But then they found Pokemon Go gets a lot of people to one location looking at this one particular spot. That's perfect. I'm just gonna seed here and just gonna send a message, send a tag out to the via a signal of some kind to this brand new basically iFeast app that I found. And just get a shit ton of people to this park and or into the middle of this middle of this street, so that I can just absorb everybody's essence and just see what comes out. It's like fucking Monster Rancher now, where they just stitched it you don't know what monster you're gonna get when it blooms.
Yeah.
God.
So yeah. Now that we've talked about 45 different things to use as examples, this is the big kitchen sink thing, but this is one of the things that you've probably heard, internet. A lot of my games have a story behind them and a reason for them and an idea behind them. So this is the thing I'm starting to challenge people when they start making games. This comes from my own problems I'm having in academia. Is you can't just make a thing, you have to explain the reason for it and why. And I've noticed a lot in my conversations with people making tabletop games that I stand alone sometimes, because instead of just trying to do a cool thing, I typically want to have something spooky on purpose. So the Delta Green thing is study on language. The Plucker game, the Toy Story game, is a look at nostalgia and loss of innocence. The Digimon game is also another corruption of innocence and exploration of friendship and what that means. A lot of my games are designed around exploring a question I think is very interesting and ultimately revealing usually a scene that is all right, guys, time for you to answer the question. So my challenge for this, and maybe for Crazon, is how do we make a question out of this? Cultist, sorry.
It's okay. I go by many names.
You go by man with many names and many mouths. How do we make a question out of this of that points to a penultimate situation? What? Because I have a couple, because that's just how my brain works. But I challenge you to see if you can come up with one while I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll give you a minute. I'll do the one that's just right off the top of my head. So, again, horror is usually about the corruption of something understandable. Lovecraft had a story about HVAC that was going to make people live forever because it kept the body cold, so it couldn't decompose. I think I need to read up more, but I think that was mainly done because he knew about it and he wanted to make something stupid, spooky, and get paid, which is 95% of what he did.
I mean, he was a writer in the 20s and 30s.
So using that, we can kind of think of how to make this. It's all right, now we have an AR overlay. We are purposefully misunderstanding what AR is to a degree and using it to create a warped point. All right, but what is that point? And how do we want to address this? So a potential point that we can think of about this, if we go with, I'm going to go with the Dreamlands one. So sorry if that steals your idea. And going again with the Hypnos idea that Hypnos is dragging people in, is that AR itself is releasing an idea that there is another world out there. There's the creation of multiple worlds, heightening our ability to understand and cognate what the world can be like, what multiple personalities, perceptions can be like. So the game itself could focus around the ideas of perception of the world, more specifically what you want, so that by the end of it, you ask a question of what perception do the players and the characters themselves accept? Do they accept base reality? Do they accept the merged reality? Do they accept the Dreamlands reality? Or do they reject all of them and go to the unknown, potentially a Carcosa-style black hole map? And then you start having that itself is a big question. And a lot of this is done for longer campaigns, audience. This is not something you can cover in a single one shot. You're very good. I'm not very good. But that now creates a 4-layer question that you can then reflect on your players and your characters and have a discussion on that, potentially opening the door for something else. The reason the reason I'm pushing for this is also to get people to start making things that aren't just cool. I'm going to recreate something I think is interesting, but also to push the medium forward. Also as a bit of self-practice, because these type of questions are things I want to start introducing into the academy as things that should be studied using tabletop. So that's just a quick baseline idea I've thrown together. Hammer out or make more, especially if you want to try and reflect that back into your players and have a discussion about it, about reality and perception. But that's my quick idea. Do you have one?
I think I have like the start of one here, because I really am starting to get attached to the idea I'm going to dub the Monster Bloom.
No, that's great.
Which is the haunted house Ouija board. AR is now here. And I think the question that I want the story to kind of answer, or like to kind of like address, is like at least the topics of like not mass hysteria, but like mass superstition and like hive mind or like mob mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Like how because like one of the things, especially for the AR scenario, if it is a 3-part thing I'm doing. Specifically like that one, because I'm drawing inspiration, much like how sci-fi does commentary on social matters and such.
Yes.
For me, this part like it's kind of a commentary on again like the mass hysteria that happened as a result of Pokemon Go going so viral. Like I was reading articles that were getting into the mainstream news of people blocking whole neighborhoods and traffic as they marched en masse to a park in New York or to a rando location or like to like a building because that's where the gym had been like designated for in the game. So like people like businesses were having to either putting up signs saying Pokemon Go like a checkpoint or whatever, welcome in to come in, because they were seeing it as a business opportunity. But then there were people that were like businesses and offices that were like basically like putting up signs that were like, don't come here, like we don't want you here kind of thing, like because they were getting hundreds of people like showing up en masse trying to find this stupid like virtual pet.
Yeah.
So I think at least for the one game, like it'd be a commentary on just the fact that like how easily like a fad or like a how mediums can be used to like just amass a mob, regardless of their intentions. Like to a single location, and then like what's the monster that blooms out of that? And for Monster Bloom, it'll literally be a monster blooms out of that.
And I think that is actually a thing you can stretch through all 3 of them, because then you can have your first one not be a haunted house, but be a mine.
Also, treasure hunting was a huge thing back in those days as well.
Yeah,
like,
so
they constantly consulted like weird types of divination in attempts to find like treasure that doesn't exist, like it never existed, but people like mass hysteria and mass rumors like spread, and people like thought they could get rich by like dowsing or consulting spirits or what have you to find a treasure that doesn't exist. So yeah, going to like an abandoned mine shaft or like a Baraska, like a mine that hasn't given any fruit in a while. But some old Jim Bob in like the 2 towns over said that has been like spreading rumors that like that mine has old McCluskey's like treasure trove in it. So like everybody is going there and like using different methods to like try and douse it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's your initial setup of like, oh, this is a haunted, creepy mine. Why does it feel like it's sentient? What is this thing going on there? Then your next one could literally be a Ouija board in a house that is now haunted.
Yeah,
digging through the history of like, again, because that's just another fad of a certain type, and you see that okay, this is now localized to a smaller location. It has resonance with the previous one. Again, that one was more greed focused. This one might also be greed focused. Specifically looking into like, oh, we use a Ouija board to figure out where they hid their treasure.
Yeah.
And then the third one could be Pokemon Go and be based in one of like, you could even use this Bloom monster as just like, oh yeah, this location used the Pokemon Go to bolster their sales and like did some dirty things so that they marked up the prices, and now it's just the store, and then have it be a localized thing that then turns into whatever.
Yeah.
And that's focusing more specifically on greed and like the desire for wealth and capitalism, but you could alter that to different.
Yeah. Actually, another idea I had a while back was so there's this town, it has a place called the Rumor Mill, like in quotes, because it's this old dusky silo in the mill off in like off out just outside, like just at the city limits in the middle of like the off a country road. And there are so many conflicting stories and rumors about it as to like why the property didn't like keep, why it's sitting there. And the idea I had was basically the rumor mill itself is a living enigma. Like everybody goes there and they all get a different story, or they all get a different like thing manifest, because it basically just feeds off of whatever your perspective is there, or like whatever the rumor that you have in your mind on the place, that's what it manifests.
So I would suggest for that one specifically, another piece of media to look into. Terry Pratchett. I will continue to throw out things, so you're gonna have a long time writing these references.
I'm gonna listen to this when I edit and just like, all right, write this down.
Specifically in one of the books, they talk about gnarly ground. I've talked about this before. Yes. It's an amazing idea, but it's the idea that terrain changes based on perception. So like crossing a wooden bridge turns into crossing a wooden bridge over a small lake turns into crossing a wooden bridge over a ravine in the mountain, when actuality is not. And it's the idea that the perception of the individual alters the terrain to a point that it is either detrimental or nothing. And using that to tie into your idea that you were just talking about of a self-perpetuating rumor mill sounds really on point for that. And like hacking that out into what this genus loci, I guess, would be, and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and maybe the Monster Bloom thing and the rumor mill are tied to the same thing. Like it's just another version of it. Yeah, I think we've got a lot of material here. Is there anything else you'd like to bring up for Pokemon Go as a sense of fodder, or as a source of fodder?
I think I've covered enough, because I think I could probably do this for hours, because that's essentially what I want to do, is do this for hours. So we will spare you, internet.
Yes, come out to Gen Con and talk to us sometime.
Yeah, I'm going to be there this year. Hopefully I can get my school to pay for it. I might be either conducting research on how GMs do and create tabletop role-playing games, or I will be there for some other friggin' reason. But I am coming, and I might just have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah. And I will
be running that spooky game I mentioned about concept objects.
Sweet. Storage Wars.
Woot woot.
Yeah. And I'll be there probably. I'll run some like regular I'll run something, I'm sure, at some point. But yeah, so back on this. Yeah, I don't really have much else. I think we've covered a lot. I am going to sit down and now start writing up Monster Bloom.
No problem.
Maybe I'll run that. Who knows? Yeah, because I like the idea of like finding fodder for games, and like also like you said, like it's cool. It's fun to have a game that's like just cool because it has a cool idea. But I also like, as somebody who is a writer, an artist, I've taken sci-fi classes in college. I like the idea of examining culture or examining in a facet of our reality through the stories that we tell. So, yeah, I like the idea of of adding that extra layer of depth to your game that we've been doing. So, I guess that was this week's episode. If you like what you heard, or if you didn't, leave us a comment in the comment section below where this gets posted, whether it be on Podbean, Facebook, YouTube, or Tumblr. I'm on Twitter at ReviewCultist. Travis, do you have anything you'd like to promote and get out there?
Come to Gen Con. Come talk to me.
Yeah.
I don't really do much currently because I'm in a PhD program. So this is my fun day right now, talking to cultists. I do have... You can contact me through my email, which is tgasque@gatech.edu. That is my student email. Or at gmail.com, either one of those. I will send me an email. We can talk about something, schedule it. If you're in the area, you can come talk to me in person, but you're buying me lunch because I have price rates now because my time is precious. And then also, if you're interested in following me on Twitter, I am at JU_Munster, also called Wandering Scholar. You'll see me posting random crap, basically. Bitching about things, maybe putting out a poll on what to run for Gen Con, and scheduling play tests depending on what people, depending on what run the results and stuff like that. So,
all right, you can also send us emails at Rigamortis at @gmail.com. That's ALDENTERIGAMORTIS@gmail.com, where you can send us suggestions for other creepypastas, SCP entries, anything that's most creepy and most pasta, or most creepy and most internet, because you can get some fodder, some weird creepy fodder from the internet. So, and if you'd like to help support the show, you can go to Patreon. Look up Al Dente Rigamortis on Patreon and select the backer tier you'd like to support us at. We have $2 and $5 tier with special episodes, extra content, early access. To our patrons that are already helping support the show, thank you guys immensely. You're helping keep those hosting bills at bay, and we very much appreciate that. Also, to the listeners of our show and our authors of these stories, as well as the posters of this, like VultureCultureCoyote, thank you for coming up with such a cool idea that we were able to kind of mine for game fodder and story stuff. Without you guys, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So thank you. Or we would, but it'd be a little bit less frequent. So thank you. Until next time, I've been your host, Review Cultist.
I'm Travis.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.
Or don't.